Well, good evening. I hope that you've had a great day today. I hope you've been encouraged and uplifted today. I want us to focus our thoughts for just a few minutes this evening on Psalm 97. Now, in this psalm, the psalmist acknowledges God. He calls the reader to rejoice in God. And not just the reader, but the whole earth to rejoice in who God is, His power and His might. As a matter of fact, he discusses the fact that God will judge those who are evildoers, those who fail to worship Him, those who fail to rejoice in Him. And so this psalm, it calls to attention for us a scene that took place in the history of the Israelites. And we find this event in Exodus 19 and 20. And this is the point at which, after leaving from Egyptian bondage, and they've made their way across the Red Sea to freedom, as it were, and they're making their way toward the Promised Land. They come to Mount Sinai, and this is where we see God descending upon the mountain. And it's that descent upon the mountain that causes the people to be terrified. And then Exodus 20, we see God giving the 10 Commandments. And at the end of chapter 20, at the end of God giving these 10 Commandments, we see the people being so terrified by what they're witnessing and by the sound of the voice of God that they start pushing Moses up the mountain, as it were, pushing him toward God, saying, we're going to back away. You go talk to him. We can't bear to hear him any longer. We're afraid we're going to die. They're terrified by what they've seen. And in Psalm 97, we're given just a brief glimpse or a reminder of that scene. So listen to what he says, the first two verses of Psalm 97. The Lord reigns. Let the earth rejoice. Let the many coastlands be glad. Clouds and thick darkness are all around him. Righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. And so in these two verses, Psalm 97, we see the idea of God being the ruler of all things, that in fact He is righteous, and that the whole earth should rejoice, that the coastlands should be glad. Essentially, this is a parallelism where he says, let the whole earth rejoice, let the coastlands be glad. It's this very similar thing from sea to sea. Let the earth rejoice in who God is and His righteousness, that He reigns. So let the earth rejoice. But then verse 2, clouds and thick darkness are all around him. Now, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense to us when we just think about God, because oftentimes our minds go to the fact that God is light. And so therefore it would seem that thick darkness would be out of place in a discussion of God. But if you remember back, as I mentioned a moment ago, to Exodus 20, when God's presence descends upon Mount Sinai, there's thick smoke and darkness and a loud trumpet blast calling attention to the people. And so they will focus their attention on the mountain, on the presence of God there. And as God delivers the 10 Commandments, the people are terrified because of the thick smoke, the darkness, as it were, the cloud of smoke that has descended upon Mount Sinai. They're terrified by it. And so again, it's the presence of God. And when we are in the presence of God, when we truly understand who He is, I believe we may have that same kind of reaction, because very quickly we will understand who we are as we stand in His presence, that we are not worthy. And that's enough to bring terror in our minds. But that's not exactly what the psalmist is going for here in Psalm 97. I want you to think about it again. The Lord reigns, he says. Let all the earth rejoice. Let the coastlands be glad. Clouds and thick darkness, they are all around him. And then verse 3, after he has said righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. Verse 3, fire goes before him and burns up his adversaries all around. His lightnings light up the world, and the earth sees and trembles. The mountains melt like wax before the Lord of all the earth. This is the reality of coming into the presence of God and recognizing who we are. And so it is that his fire goes before him. It burns his adversaries. This is the judgment of God going before him. He takes care of those that turn against him. God will not let them stand. As a matter of fact, his lightnings light up the world. Earth sees and trembles. Mountains melt like wax. And so as we burn candles, we know that the wax, as it becomes liquid and starts to drip, this is exactly the imagery that the psalmist is putting before us, that our hearts will melt. Well, this is reminiscent to the history of the Israelites as they would come through and conquer various peoples. At times, we are told in Scripture that when the people hear about what God has done, their hearts melt. This is that same imagery. When you understand that you are an enemy of God and you understand who God is, you'll melt just like these mountains, like wax. You're going to melt before him, before the Lord of all the earth. And so recognize who God is, that he reigns, that all the earth should rejoice, that clouds and thick darkness are all around him, that righteousness and justice are the foundation of his throne. Well, look, if we continue on at verse 6, the heavens proclaim his righteousness, and all the peoples see his glory. All worshipers of images are put to shame, who make their boast in worthless idols. Worship him, all you gods, is the call. Don't worship these gods that are no gods at all, these idols, but worship the one God who reigns, the Lord who reigns. Worship him. And so he goes on to say in verse 8, Zion hears and is glad, and the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments, O Lord. For you, O Lord, are most high over all the earth. You are exalted above all gods. And so the psalmist is very clear here in his acknowledgement of who God is and the reaction that his people have toward him. Zion hears and is glad. This is representative of the people of Jerusalem. And so the daughters of Judah, again, a parallelism. The daughters of Judah rejoice. They know who you are. They are your people, and they rejoice. They are glad because of who you are, because of your judgments, O Lord. And then he says, for you, O Lord, you are high. You are most high over all the earth. Over all others, you're going to be exalted, God, among your people. That's the context. And then verse 10, O you who love the Lord, hate evil. That's the call of the psalmist. If you love the Lord, then hate evil. Don't say you love the Lord and cling to evil as well. You can't ride the fence. Just like Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount, you can't serve two masters. And the psalmist here is very clear. If you love the Lord, then hate evil. That's the call. Then he says, he preserves the lives of his saints. He delivers them from the hand of the wicked. And in verse 11, light is sown for the righteous and joy for the upright in heart. God provides. God is going to supply what you need. He's going to care for you. He's going to watch over you. Light is sown for the righteous, joy for the upright in heart. And then verse 12 comes. Rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous, and give thanks to his holy name. And so he starts out by saying, the Lord reigns. Let all the earth rejoice. Let the coastlands be glad. So recognize who God is and know that he reigns. And he finishes the psalm by saying, rejoice in the Lord, O you righteous. You followers of God, rejoice in him. Give thanks to his holy name. I think for us, we need to make sure that every day we remember who God is, that we remind ourselves that God reigns, and we recognize the fact that God will not stand for those who do evil. He will not stand for those who turn against him. And we need to remember every day to rejoice in him, to give him thanks, because he is most high over all others. Let's make sure that we do that today.